The sky above New Zealand burned orange and red as plasma fire rained down from the Krek's warships hovering in low orbit. Captain Minji pressed her back against the crumbling wall of what used to be the central communications hub, feeling the heat from the explosions outside. Her uniform was torn and covered in dust from the collapsing buildings around her. Just 3 weeks ago, she had been giving tours to young Zilani students, showing them how their peaceful world stayed connected with the other colonies across their small empire. The children would laugh and ask silly questions about talking to aliens. Now those same children were gone, turned to ash, along with their families when the Krek's bombardment began. Minji crawled across the broken floor to the emergency broadcast station. The main array was destroyed, but this old backup system might still work. Her hands shook as she powered it up, not from fear, but from anger. The Zilani had never hurt anyone. For 3,000 years, they had been farmers, artists, and philosophers. They made beautiful music and grew gardens that could feed entire cities. They had no armies because they had no enemies. Until the Kreks came, the Dominion warriors had arrived without warning, their massive black ships blocking out the sun. They demanded surrender, but offered no terms except extinction. When the Zilani leaders tried to negotiate, the Kreks simply opened fire. Colony after colony went dark. Billions of lives snuffed out like candles in a storm. The broadcast equipment crackled to life, its green lights flickering weakly. Minji could hear the Krek's ground forces breaking through the outer defenses. Heavy footsteps and alien voices echoed through the corridors. She had maybe minutes before they reached her. She activated the wide-spectrum transmitter, sending her words racing across space at the speed of light. Her voice was steady despite everything falling apart around her. To anyone listening across the stars, we are the Zilani. We died today, but we lived. For 3,000 years, we lived in peace. We grew food that could feed worlds. Our children sang songs that made the birds come down from the trees to listen. We painted pictures of sunsets that lasted for hours because our days were long and beautiful. An explosion shook the building. Dust fell from the ceiling onto her shoulders. Remember us, our culture, our songs, our children, all lost to those who see only conquest. We asked the galaxy for help, but no one came. The Hegemony Council said it was not their concern. The Trade Federation said we had nothing they wanted. The other peaceful worlds went silent when we called their names. She could hear the Krek soldiers getting closer, their plasma rifles charged, with a distinctive whining sound. If there are those who hear this and care about justice, know that evil has triumphed here. But maybe, somewhere in the darkness between stars, someone will remember that we existed. Someone will remember that we were good. The transmission cut as Krek's plasma cannons vaporized the last Zilani city. The signal raced across the galaxy, carrying their final testimony into the cold, empty void of space. Lieutenant Jiho rubbed his tired eyes and took another sip of his cold coffee. He had been staring at the same alien signal for 3 weeks now, trying to make sense of the strange patterns flowing across his screens. The Deep Space Monitoring Station on Luna was supposed to be a quiet assignment, mostly tracking asteroid movements and listening for routine communications between human colonies. This signal was different. It had come from somewhere far beyond human space, carrying emotional weight that even the computer couldn't ignore. The translation algorithms kept spitting out fragments, words about death, children, songs. But they needed more context, more time to piece together the complete message. The door to the communications center burst open and Dr. Yuna rushed in, her lab coat still covered in coffee stains from working through another sleepless night. Her usually neat hair was messy, and her hands trembled slightly as she carried a data pad. "Jiho, you need to see this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I finally cracked their language structure. The translation is complete. She connected her pad to the main display, and suddenly the alien words transformed into clear human text. Jiho felt his stomach drop as he read the desperate plea from Captain Minji, the peaceful Zilani civilization. 3,000 years of culture. Billions of lives all wiped out while the galaxy watched. They're all gone, Yuna whispered, sinking into a nearby chair. The Zilani broadcast this knowing they would die. They weren't asking for rescue anymore. They just wanted someone to remember them. Jiho pulled up the galactic communication logs, his fingers flying over the keyboard. If the Zilani had sent distress calls, there should be records of other species responding. What he found made him feel sick. Look at this, he said, pointing at the screen. They sent emergency signals to 17 different worlds. The Hegemony Council, the Trade Federation, even smaller peaceful species like themselves. Every single transmission shows as received and acknowledged. Yuna leaned over his shoulder to read the responses. Insufficient strategic value, she read aloud from one reply. Request denied due to Krek's Dominion territorial claims, said another. Unable to provide assistance at this time, was the most common response. The worst part was the silence from species that the Zilani had considered friends. 3 civilizations that had traded with them for centuries simply stopped responding to their calls completely. They had abandoned the Zilani to face extinction alone. How could they all just ignore this? Jiho asked, his voice rising with anger. An entire species was being wiped out, and nobody cared enough to even try helping them. Yuna stared at the final message from Captain Minji, tears forming in her eyes. Because it wasn't profitable. Because it was dangerous. Because it wasn't their problem. She looked up at Jiho with fierce determination. But maybe humans are different. Jiho was already reaching for the secure communication link to Earth. Send this to Earth Command immediately, he ordered the computer. Priority Alpha classification. The Council needs to see this right now. As the message raced toward Earth at faster than light speed, both officers sat in the quiet monitoring station, knowing that humanity was about to learn something terrible about how the galaxy really worked. The emergency session had been called at 3 in the morning, Earth time. The United Earth Council chamber buzzed with quiet conversations as representatives from every human nation filed in, many still in casual clothes they had thrown on after being woken by urgent calls from their aides. President Do-Yan stood at the center of the circular chamber, holding a datapad that contained the translated Zilani message. The holographic display above showed the last known image of the Zilani homeworld, a beautiful blue and green planet with white clouds swirling around floating cities that looked like works of art. Before we begin, Do-Yan said, his voice heavy with exhaustion, I want everyone to listen to this message in its entirety. No interruptions. The chamber fell completely silent as Captain Minji's final broadcast played through the speakers. Her voice, desperate but dignified, filled the room. Several representatives wiped their eyes when she mentioned the children's songs. Others clenched their fists when she described how the galaxy had abandoned them. When the message ended, the silence stretched for nearly a full minute. General Han, a practical man who had served in 3 colonial wars, spoke first. They're already dead, he stated matter-of-factly, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. The Zilani were wiped out weeks ago. We have no strategic interest in their territory. The Krek's Dominion has never threatened human space. From a military standpoint, intervention makes no sense. Representative Kyung from the Asian Federation shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The general is right about the strategic aspect, but what about the moral implications? If we do nothing, aren't we just like all the other species that ignored their calls? Ambassador Soyagi, who had spent years negotiating with alien governments, spoke softly, but they called for help. They died believing no one in the galaxy cared enough to answer. Captain Minji's final words weren't asking for revenge. She just wanted someone to remember them. The Brazilian representative leaned forward. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old wars on Earth. before unification. She said, the worst thing wasn't the fighting. It was when people stopped caring about right and wrong, when they only looked out for themselves. This is exactly what she meant, added the representative from the African Union. We have the power to respond. And we're sitting here talking about strategy and interests, while an entire civilization's genocide goes unanswered. President Doyon looked around the chamber, seeing the struggle in every face. These were good people, leaders who had dedicated their lives to serving humanity. But this decision would define what kind of species humans were going to be in the galactic community. The question before us isn't whether we can help the Zilani, he said quietly. The question is whether we're the kind of people who answer calls for help, even when it's too late to save anyone. He stood up straight, his decision clear. All in favor of military intervention. Every hand rose without hesitation. Not a single representative voted against action. The vote was unanimous. Let the record show, Doyon declared, his voice carrying, across the chamber and into history, that humanity heard their call. Admiral Wu Jin stood on the observation deck of the command station orbiting Mars, watching something that had never happened before in human history. Across 12 star systems, every shipyard, every factory, every manufacturing facility was working around the clock. The glow from welding torches and assembly lines created new constellations in the darkness of space. 3 days ago, these same facilities had been building cargo haulers, passenger liners, and mining equipment. Now they were creating instruments of war on a scale that made previous human conflicts look like playground fights. Status report, he commanded as he walked onto the bridge of his flagship. The massive carrier Inshin's Pride, Captain Yu, looked up from her data screens, exhaustion clear on her face, but determination burning in her eyes. 8,000 vessels ready for deployment, sir. The heavy cruisers from the Titan yards finished their weapon installations this morning. The planet crackers will be operational within the week. Wujin felt a chill at those words. Planet crackers were weapons humanity had hoped never to use. Massive ships designed to crack open hostile worlds from orbit. They had been built as a last resort against alien invasion, stored in secret facilities, and forgotten by most people. Now they were being pulled out of mothballs and prepared for a war that wasn't even humanity's fight. Through the massive viewport, he watched the dreadnought Sol's Vengeance emerge from the Luna construction yards. The kilometer-long ship was a masterpiece of human engineering and human anger. Its hull bristled with weapons that could reduce a city to ash in seconds. Smaller destroyers and frigates moved around it like protective wolves, their own weapons gleaming in the light of Sol. What about personnel? Wujin asked. That's the incredible part, sir, Yunji replied, pulling up another screen. Volunteer applications have exceeded our wildest projections. We've had to turn people away. Retired veterans are coming out of retirement. Civilians are abandoning their jobs to join the fleet. We've got farmers from the colonies learning to operate weapon systems, and teachers from Earth training as communications officers. Wujin shook his head in amazement. They know this isn't our war, right? They know the Zilani are already dead. They know, sir, but they're still coming. A grandmother from New Tokyo told the recruitment officer that her grandson should grow up in a galaxy where good people answer calls for help. A former mining engineer said he was tired of being ashamed of how the galaxy works. The admiral walked to the tactical display, showing the growing fleet. Ships from every human world were converging on the Sol system. Battle groups were forming that could challenge entire star empires. All for a species they had never met, who were already gone. They'll ask why we're doing this, Wujin muttered, thinking about the alien ambassadors, who were already sending confused messages to Earth. Because someone had to, Yunji answered simply, echoing the words she had heard from dozens of volunteers over the past few days. Outside, another wave of ships emerged from the orbital yards, their hulls fresh and their weapons untested. But their crews carried something more dangerous than any weapon. The absolute certainty that they were doing the right thing. The sight was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. 10,000 human vessels stretched across the space, near Jupiter, creating what looked like a metallic constellation that blocked out entire sections of stars. From the smallest patrol craft to the massive kilometer-long battleship Bison's Fury, every ship in humanity's arsenal had answered the call. Admiral Wujin stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the assembled armada through the massive viewport. Destroyers darted between the larger ships like schools of fish, their sleek hulls reflecting the light from Jupiter's storms. Heavy cruisers floated in perfect formation, their weapon arrays powered down but ready. The planet crackers hung at the center of the fleet like sleeping giants, their dark hulls almost invisible against the black of space. "Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from alien monitoring stations," reported Communication Officer. "Junho, the Veltari, Hegemony, and Trade Federation all want to know what we're doing." Through the speakers came the confused voice of the Veltari ambassador. "Human fleet, explain your unprecedented military mobilization. Why mobilize such force for a dead species? Your actions violate standard galactic protocols for territorial disputes." Similar messages flooded in from across the galaxy. Every major power was demanding explanations, threats, and justifications. The galaxy's intelligence networks had never seen anything like this, an entire species committing its military might to avenge strangers they had never met. Admiral Wujin activated the fleet-wide communication system, broadcasting his response on all frequencies so every ship and every alien listener could hear. The Zalani called for help. We heard them. The simplicity of his words sent shockwaves through alien command centers. Military strategists from a dozen species tried to decode the hidden meaning, the secret agenda, the true motivation behind humanity's massive deployment. They found nothing because there was nothing hidden. Humans were exactly as they appeared to be. On the destroyer, Daegu's Honor, Captain Minseo watched her crew make final preparations. Half of them were volunteers who had left civilian jobs to be here. Her weapons officer had been a school teacher just 2 weeks ago. Her navigator was a retired grandmother who had learned starship operations on computer simulators. "All ships, report ready for hyperspace jump," announced Fleet Captain Teon from the command vessel. The energy buildup was visible even from hundreds of kilometers away. 10,000 hyperspace engines charging simultaneously created ripples in space itself. The smaller ships disappeared first, vanishing in flashes of blue light. Then the cruisers and battleships followed, their massive forms stretching and warping before blinking out of existence. The planet crackers went last, their disappearance creating tears in space that took several seconds to heal. Within moments, the largest military force in human history had vanished, leaving only confused alien witnesses and empty space where humanity's greatest armada had gathered at monitoring stations across the galaxy. Alien observers stared at their screens in disbelief. The humans had actually done it. They had mobilized their entire military might to avenge a species that was already extinct, gaining nothing in return except the knowledge that they had answered a cry for help. The galaxy would never be the same. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zalani system, and what they saw made hardened veterans fall silent in horror. The Zalani system was a graveyard, but worse than that, it was a graveyard being picked clean by scavengers. Where the beautiful blue homeworld had once orbited, there was now only an asteroid field. Chunks of what had been cities, gardens, and homes tumbled slowly through space. Atmosphere still leaked from some of the larger pieces, creating ghostly trails of frozen air that sparkled in the system's dying light. "Dear God," whispered Navigator Sungyin, his voice barely audible over the bridge's quiet hum. He had seen battlefields before, but this was different. This was the complete erasure of an entire world. Admiral Wujin gripped the railing of his command platform, his knuckles white with rage. Through the viewport, he could see Krek's mining vessels moving between the asteroid fragments like vultures. their massive cargo holds swallowing pieces of what had once been someone's home. Scanners detect 400 Krex vessels, reported Lieutenant Minho from the sensor station, his young voice shaking slightly. They've built orbital processing stations throughout the system, sir. They're mining the debris. The tactical displays showed the full scope of the horror. Krex industrial ships had set up operations on every former Zilani colony. Massive refineries floated where peaceful farming worlds had once grown food for billions. The aliens weren't just occupying the system, they were consuming it, turning every trace of Zilani civilization into raw materials for their war machine. Captain Hannah moved closer to the display, studying the readings from the Krex facilities. Her face went pale as she realized what the sensors were showing. Admiral, those aren't just mining operations. They're processing cultural artifacts, art pieces, even children's toys. They're melting down everything the Zilani ever made. They're desecrating graves, whispered Communications Officer Bogum, staring at his screen in disbelief. On the tactical display, Admiral Wujin could see Krex workers loading Zilani sculptures and monuments into industrial furnaces. Paintings that had survived the bombardment were being reduced to their base elements. 3,000 years of culture was being turned into scrap metal and chemical compounds. Suddenly, the communication array crackled to life. A harsh alien voice filled the bridge, speaking in the guttural language of the Krex Dominion. The universal translator converted the words into cold, mechanical English. Unknown fleet, identify yourselves. This system belongs to the Dominion by right of conquest. Depart immediately, or pay tribute for passage through our territory. The casual arrogance in the alien's voice sent ice through every human heart. To the Krex, this wasn't a crime scene, it was just another business opportunity. They didn't even remember the name of the species they had destroyed. Admiral Wujin activated the ship's communication system, his voice deadly calm when he responded, "We are humanity. We're here because the Zilani called for help." The silence that followed stretched across space, filled with the weight of 10,000 human ships and the promise of justice that had traveled across the galaxy to arrive at this moment. The Krex commander Vextel stared at his tactical display, in complete bewilderment. In 40 years of conquest, he had never encountered such an illogical response from any species. His scales rippled with confusion as he tried to process what the human admiral had just said. "The Zilani are extinct," he transmitted back, his voice carrying the patient tone he might use with a slow child. "They have been dead for weeks. There is no profit in this system for you. There is no logic in your presence here." Admiral Wood's response came back immediately, his voice carrying across all frequencies so every ship in both fleets could hear. "Logic. The logic is simple, Commander. When innocents cry for help, someone should answer. It doesn't matter if we arrive too late to save them." Vextel looked around his bridge at his confused crew. They were veterans of a dozen genocides, conquerors who had wiped out civilizations across 3 star sectors. They understood profit, territory, resources, and power. But this human concept of helping strangers for no gain was completely alien to them. "You will gain nothing from this action," Vextal tried again. The Zilani had no valuable technology. Their worlds contained only common minerals. You cannot even claim their territory because it no longer exists. "We're not here for profit," came Admiral Wujin's cold reply. "We're here for justice." The Krex fleet moved into attack formation, their massive dreadnoughts spreading out to intimidate these strange newcomers. 400 vessels, each one a veteran of successful campaigns against peaceful civilizations. Their weapons had cracked dozens of worlds. Their crews had never known defeat. They were about to learn why that was about to change. The human response was swift and absolute. Captain Minjung aboard the destroyer Guangzhou's Vengeance watched her targeting systems lock onto 3 Krex cruisers simultaneously. All weapons, fire at will, came the order across the fleet. What followed wasn't really a battle, it was an execution. Human weapons, designed with one specific purpose in mind, tore through Krek's shields like paper. The planet crackers unleashed beams of energy that could split moons, turning Krek's dreadnoughts into expanding clouds of plasma and metal. Lieutenant Sung Yoon watched from his weapons console as Krek's ships tried desperately to return fire. Their plasma cannons, designed to bombard helpless planets, were useless against ships built to fight. They're not even military vessels, he realized with horror. They're just mining ships with weapons attached. The Kreks had grown soft from decades of attacking defenseless civilizations. They had forgotten how to fight against an enemy that could fight back. Within 3 hours, every Krek's vessel was either destroyed or disabled, drifting powerless among the asteroid remains of the Zalani homeworld. The survivors found themselves facing human boarding parties, and a choice that no Krek's commander had ever been forced to make. You will stand trial for genocide, Admiral Woojin announced to the surviving Krek's crews, or you can join your victims. Most chose trial, hoping human justice might show them mercy their own species had never offered others. Some chose neither, preferring death to judgment. The Zalani had been avenged. Admiral Woojin stood alone on the observation deck of his flagship, looking out at the scattered remains of what had once been the Zalani homeworld. Pieces of cities drifted past the viewport like frozen tears, each fragment a reminder of the billions of lives that had been lost while the galaxy stood by and watched. Behind him, the bridge crew worked quietly to set up the most important broadcast in human history. Communication Officer Junho adjusted the galaxy-wide transmitter array, making sure the signal would reach every inhabited system within days. This message needed to be heard by every species, every government, every individual who might one day face the choice between helping others or looking away. "Array is ready, Admiral," reported Captain Yoonji. "All frequencies are open. The entire galaxy will hear this." Woojin activated the broadcast system, knowing that his words would soon be playing in alien command centers, diplomatic chambers, and homes across thousands of worlds. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute conviction. "Let this serve as notice to all species," he began. "Humanity has heard the final testimony of the Zalani people. We have seen their cities reduced to ash, their worlds cracked like eggs, their culture erased by those who see only profit and destruction." The tactical data from the battle began transmitting alongside his words. Across the galaxy, alien military analysts would watch in stunned silence as the supposedly invincible Krek's Dominion's fleet was torn apart in mere hours. Ships that had terrorized peaceful worlds for decades were reduced to scrap metal by human weapons designed for one purpose. At the Hegemony Council's headquarters, Ambassador Kylter watched the battle footage with growing horror. The humans had built weapons unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, not for conquest or expansion, but specifically to destroy those who committed genocide. Their ships moved with precision that spoke of careful planning and righteous anger. The Krek's Fourth Fleet was eliminated in 3 hours, Woojin continued, his voice echoing across space. 400 vessels, veterans of a dozen successful campaigns against peaceful civilizations, could not stand against the fury of a species that refuses to ignore cries for help. On the Trade Federation's monitoring station, Director Zalvis frantically tried to calculate the implications. If humans could destroy the Kreks so easily, what did that mean for other species who had built their power on oppressing the weak? "Know this," Admiral Woojin's voice grew harder, filled with the promise of consequences. "Humanity hears every cry for help, even from the dead. We will cross the galaxy to answer it. Distance means nothing to us. Profit means nothing to us. The only thing that matters is that innocence should not die alone and forgotten." The broadcast data showed human fleet movements, revealing the true scope of their military might. 10,000 vessels, planet crackers, weapons that could shatter worlds, all deployed, not for conquest, but for justice. The next species that chooses genocide should remember the Zilani, Wujin concluded, his final words carrying across the void to every corner of civilized space. And remember that humans never forget. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to contemplate a terrifying new reality. Somewhere among the stars, someone was finally listening. 6 months had passed since the Krex fleet was destroyed, and the galaxy looked very different now. Where the Zilani homeworld had once been, a massive space station now orbited among the asteroid fragments. The Zilani Memorial Station was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Not a military base or trading post, but a monument to remembrance. The station broadcast constantly across all frequencies, sending Zilani music, poetry, and stories to every corner of space. Their gentle songs about sunrise gardens and children playing in floating cities had become popular on human worlds. Zilani language courses were now taught in schools throughout human space, ensuring their words would never be lost. Ambassador Jiwan walked through the station's central hall, where holographic displays showed scenes from Zilani life. Families sharing meals, artists painting landscapes that took days to complete, children learning to tend the crystal gardens that had made their world famous. Visitors from across the galaxy came here now, not as tourists, but as pilgrims, seeking to understand what they had all failed to protect. Her communication device chimed with another diplomatic inquiry from the Hegemony Council. She had received dozens of similar messages over the past months, all asking variations of the same confused question. Ambassador Jiwon came the formal transmission from Counselor Val. Our analysts still cannot comprehend human motivations. Your species committed enormous resources to avenge strangers, gaining no territory, no trade advantages, no strategic benefit. Why do humans act without benefit to themselves? Jiwan smiled sadly as she composed her reply. After 6 months, they still didn't understand. You still don't understand, she transmitted back. Helping others is the benefit. The Zilani called for help. Someone had to answer. The changes across the galaxy were remarkable. The Therian Republic, which had ignored 17 different genocide alerts over the past century, now maintained rapid response fleets. The Merchant Alliance had established refugee protection protocols they had previously considered unprofitable. Even the isolationist Crystal communes had opened their borders to fleeing populations. Fear had accomplished what millennia of diplomacy could not. Not fear of human conquest, but fear of human judgment. Every species now knew that somewhere, in the darkness between stars, humans were listening to their emergency broadcasts, monitoring their responses to cries for help. Captain Dong-Yun, now stationed permanently at the memorial, watched a group of young hegemony officers touring the Zilani cultural exhibits. Their faces showed the same confused expression he had seen on countless alien visitors. They couldn't understand why humans would care about strangers they had never met. The memorial receives over 10,000 visitors per month now, he reported to Admiral Wujin during their weekly call. Most come expecting to find some hidden human agenda. They leave understanding that remembering the dead is agenda enough. In the station's central chamber, Captain Minji's final message played on eternal loop. Her desperate plea for someone to remember her people had been answered in ways she could never have imagined. The Zilani were gone, but they were no longer forgotten, and across the galaxy, every species knew the truth that would reshape civilization forever. Somewhere among the stars, humans were listening for the next cry for help. The universe had learned that some voices, once heard, demand an answer.